I just need that recorded out. So
See when?
When?
Right, good evening everybody. Hello. Welcome to the July meeting of SUFON. Before we start, I'll just mention Skywatch. There will be one in July. We're just discussing where it's going to be at the moment. The details will be on the website, subject to weather, obviously, but we've got a couple of ideas in mind. So, August, yeah, sorry, August. Yeah, it's been a long month. The other thing I want to mention, you may notice Emlyn has got his brand new SUFON shirt on. His polo shirt, which he's going to walk up the catwalk on now. Is that the best walk you got? Come on. He was going to put his high heels on, but you know. Anyway, if you want one, they're probably in black or white. They do small, medium, large, extra large. They work out 10 quid a piece, which isn't too bad. See Emlyn in the break and put an order in and pay for it this month, and you should have it next month. Okay?
We're also going to get t-shirts now.
We're also going to get t-shirts and baseball hats and hoodies, so you can go robbing with a hoodie. Okay. Anyway, tonight I have the pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker for the evening, and that's Mr. Ben Emlyn Jones. Now, Ben's visited us on, I think, 3 separate previous occasions. A little bit about Ben. Ben was born in Aberystwyth, is that right? Aberystwyth, and he was brought up in the Lampeter area before moving to Oxford, where up to about 7 years ago he'd spent 22 well-respected years employed as a hospital porter at John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxfordshire. Now, Ben became interested in UFOs and various other conspiracy theories in the late 1990s. He started his website blog, which is Hospital Porters Against the New World Order, in 2006, and it has many, many visitors every day. He regularly attends and delivers talks and discussions all over Britain on a wide range of subjects. For instance, now on Ben's first visit to us, he discussed energy, politics and UFOs. And on his second, it was the history of exopolitics. And his third, he discussed the Nottinghamshire Roswell. Now his talk this evening is entitled SETI and UFOs. Now SETI, for those of you who don't know, I probably teaching my granny to suck eggs here, but it's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And the SETI Institute it's a research organisation whose mission is to explore, understand and explain the origin and nature of life in the universe, and applying that knowledge for the benefit of future generations. Now, it basically consists of 3 primary centres. You've got the Carl Sagan Centre, my lookalike, he's dead now, poor chap, and that studies life in the universe. You've got the Centre of Education, which studies astronomy and space science, and lastly the Centre for Public Outreach, which produces radio shows and SETI talks. Anyway, I'm sure, as always the case, Ben's talk this evening will be extremely interesting and will no doubt promote a lot of further discussion after the second half. Now, as always, he's travelled a good distance to be with us today. So without further ado, please give a warm SUFON welcome to Mr. Ben Emlyn Jones. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thanks very much for coming out on this sort of showery, wet, chilly evening. I appreciate you being here this evening, all of you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've been here a few times. It's really nice to be back, and I want to thank Mike, Steve, Emlyn, and everyone else at SUFON for inviting me back for a 4th time. That's really quite something. If 4 times, well, you know what they say, 1, 2's company, 3's a crowd, 4's an audience. So obviously you like what I do, which is really, really great. So I'm going to talk about something completely different to what I've talked about before. I like to give everyone a bit of variety when it comes to my lectures. This is SETI and UFOs. And as you just heard from Steve, SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So that basically well, I'll be explaining this evening. But firstly, before we begin, I want to play a little game with you. And those of you who've seen the recordings or the live shows of this presentation I've done before, don't spoil it for those who haven't. But there is a little coded message in this image you see in front of you. It's not a subliminal picture of Nick Pope's face, but there is a hidden message in this video. See if you can spot it, and I'll reveal later on what it is. But basically, it's almost an essence of the entire theme of this talk. Next slide, please, Mike. Let me start with a basic fact. We are not alone. That sentence is a cliche, but it's true. Now, what I mean by that is, it is statistically impossible. It is physically possible that we are alone in this universe, but statistically it is beyond common sense. Statistically, it's like claiming that it's common sense to say you can win the national lottery 10 weeks in a row. I'll just show you what I mean. Mike, the first video, please. This is just an illustration of how big the universe is. You see here, this is the Himalayas, the tallest mountains in the world. It is so much, and then it pulls out and you can see Tibet and the whole planet Earth. The whole planet Earth, we live on the planet Earth, don't we? It seems like a big place. This is an amazing video, this is. It attempts, I think, to explain the inexplicable. Because the universe is bigger than we can possibly imagine. Not just than we do imagine, than we can imagine. And as J.B.S. Haldane says, it's stranger than we can imagine too. That's that pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan called it. If you fly across that in a plane, it seems like a long way. If you take a ship, it seems even longer. These are the artificial satellites that have been put up there. There may be more. I'm not going to go into the secret space program this evening, but just assume for argument's sake that there's no secret space program, and that's your satellites. And there we are, orbiting the sun. Anyone here believe the Earth is flat? I'm at the wrong meeting. And the moon. As soon as when you get out to the moon, the Earth is already really, really small. The moon is 250,000 miles away. But when you get out to the point where you can see the whole solar system, all the planets orbiting the stars, the Earth and moon itself, as a two-body system, is almost too small to see. There are 8 major planets and countless minor ones. We still don't know how big the solar system is, but look, the solar system itself shrinks to a tiny point of light when you get out to the point where you can see all the stars. And as you see there, the sun is just another star. I mean, it's literally an average star, much like any others. And if you were going through the universe, you may even miss it, actually. That ball, that's how far our radio transmissions have gone. That blue circle, that blue sphere, since we've been broadcasting radio. There are 100 million stars in the Milky Way galaxy where we live. But there are so many galaxies. I mean, they just doubled, I think it's 10 times the number they thought there were of galaxies in the observable universe. And the galaxies themselves appear like stars. And the universe itself is just like a haze of galaxies, and each galaxy is billions of stars. The universe, the whole visible universe, a sphere of space, 49 billion light years across. But even that is not the entire universe. That's just what we can see. There's lots beyond that. It may well be infinite. It probably is. And that's the cosmic horizon with the expansion of space. It goes to 49 billion light years. But then there's also parallel universes, and there may well be an infinite number of them. So whenever anyone says to you, oh, we're all alone in the universe, it's just us and this big waste of space, you can show them this. Show them this and you can realise how ridiculous that is. Next slide, please, Mike. Right, the SETI, the search for extra-terrestrial intelligence, SETI. Not to be completely confused with SETI, that's the thing set up by Dr. Stephen Greer. The SETI is not so much a single organisation or a single scientific project, it's a movement of people. It's a movement, a scientific movement involving lots of different individuals and organisations. But it is basically the quest to find other intelligences, non-human intelligences in the universe. And I believe that its likelihood of success is 100%. It is certain they're going to find success. It's certain they're going to achieve their goal. The question is when. It's only a matter of time. It's when, not if. Now, next slide, please, Mike. Now, there's a little bit of a conundrum when it comes to SETI, and I'll be going into more details later. But the methods used by SETI are, well, I'll describe the methods more in more detail, but their premise is that the universe is teeming with life. I'll explain to you in a little while how they calculate the number of aliens there are in the universe and how many there are. There's a huge number. They agree with me about what I just showed you in that film. The universe is huge, it's complex, and so there must be billions of aliens out there. Now, this is the problem we have, right? Because I'm a ufologist. Most people in this room, I'm sure, are ufologists, and we're interested in UFOs. Now, the SETI, the people involved in SETI, have a very low opinion of us. And it's a very, very strange thing. It seems to be virtually one-sided. I mean, not completely. I mean, I know there are several people in the UFO exopolitics world who now are highly critical of SETI, and I'll be discussing their points in a little while. But most of the scorn and disdain and hostility is one way. The people in SETI, without exception, have a very low opinion of ufology. I'm talking about people like Carl Sagan, Seth Shostak, Jill Tarter, Ken Clark, all the big names of ufology going back to Frank Drake. They say, they look at UFOs and they shrug their shoulders and go, no evidence, it's nonsense. I think there is some bad logic there, some very, very bad logic. And this needs to be addressed. They are saying that the universe is teeming with life. But on no account could our life ever come and visit us. Now, what you see before you there, it looks like some kind of new shuttlecock for a game of badminton. It's actually a plan for a spacecraft 400 meters in length. This is a spacecraft designed to travel to the stars. It's called Project Daedalus. It's designed by the British Interplanetary Society in the 1960s. Over 50 years ago this was designed. It's intended to reach the nearest star, Alpha Centauri, and it can accelerate to 10% of the speed of light, which will make it the fastest spacecraft we've ever built. It is something that could be built today, and it could be built with the technology of the time that it was created. It's powered basically by nuclear explosions. Very, very simple. You basically have, the early designs had like fission bombs, or hydrogen bombs. The later designs have like hydrogen fusion to power it. It is existing technology. If the resources have been put into creating this structure when it was first designed, it could have reached the nearest star within 50 years, which means by now it would have got there. So we ourselves as humans, forget the secret space program like I said, but we ourselves as humans, even in the public arena of space exploration, have taken the first steps towards travelling to the stars. The universe is teeming with life. There's aliens on the planets orbiting the stars. And we're at the point where we can go and visit them. We could be the UFOs flying around their skies. The SETI proponents also state that aliens in other worlds may very well have a much higher level of technology than we do. Yet on no account can they ever come and visit us. They say UFOs, nonsense, it's rubbish, no evidence. Complete waste of, it's a waste of time studying it. So even though they're more advanced than us and they're everywhere, and we are getting advanced and we can go visit them, if any evidence comes to light that indicates they might have already got here, we have to dismiss it with a shrug and a chuckle. That is the bad logic I'm talking about with SETI. Next slide, please, Mike. Now, where does SETI come from? Well, it can really be traced back to this man. This is the godfather of ufology there. His name is Frank Drake. And this here is the Howard Tatel Radio Observatory, the Green Bank, so the radio telescope at the Green Bank Radio Observatory in West Virginia, USA. Now in 1960 he began something called Project Ozma. He pointed this very telescope at two stars, Torchetti and Epsilon Eridani. They're nearby stars and they're very similar to our Sun, so he thought they were good candidates for a SETI study. He thought it's possible there might be, there's likely to be life of Earth-like types, Earth-like life on that particular star. It's likely to be planets because it's a similar kind of star. And so he ran Project Ozma for a while. He did pick up what he thought was a signal from one of the stars. It turned out it was from an aircraft flying overhead. This is a common problem with SETI, which I'm going to go into in more detail in a minute. But he ran that for a few months and he couldn't find any signals coming from those two stars. Next slide, please, Mike. So what Sir Frank Drake then did the following year, 1961, he got together a group of 12 scientists, some of the best people in their field. He just put a call out. He said, I want the best scientists in every branch of science to come and meet with me and discuss the possibility of finding life out there in the universe. And so he did. He assembled them in a group at Greenbank Radio Observatory. And he called it the Order of the Dolphin. It's a strange name. I don't know if they wore masks and pranced around naked or anything like that. It's weird. I mean, they just sat around for a couple of weeks talking aliens and their possibility. And the people he had with him were, like I say, top people in the field. Otto Struve, the famous mathematician. John Lilly, the famous biologist who studies animal intelligence, chimpanzees and dolphins and other intelligence like that. And he got these people together. One of the people in the Order of the Dolphin was a young astronomer called Carl Sagan. Remember that name because he doesn't only look like Steve. He's famous for other reasons as well. And his name comes up a lot in this story, and I'll come back to him. After a couple of weeks of umming and ahhing and thrashing ideas around, they came up with what's become known as the Drake equation. Now this is the formula by which you calculate how many aliens are out there in the universe. Now the first thing they had to do, they had to confine it. They had to narrow it down to our galaxy alone, because when you think about it, you think about all the galaxies I've just shown you. Once you start going beyond our galaxy, you get to such huge numbers that there's no real point. So they narrowed it down to the Milky Way galaxy, our own home galaxy. 90,000 light years across, 100 billion stars. And they decided just to investigate those. And they came up with this, the famous Drake equation. And it runs like this. N. N is the number of contactable alien civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. And N is R star. Now that is the rate of stellar formation. That is when stars form out of the intergalactic dust and matter, which is how our sun formed. That's the rate of star formation. How many stars form? How quickly do they form? How many are there? It's R star times FP. FP is the number of those stars which develop a solar system. That is planets orbiting them in the way our Earth orbits the sun. So each of these stars develops its own solar system. Now, in 1961, no one had any idea how many that was. Today, we know that it's about 70%. So FP is about 70%. 70% of all stars appear to have some kind of planetary system, their own little solar system that we can detect. So that's a high number. So we know a lot more now than we did back then. FP times NE. Now, NE is the number of those planets on those systems that develop the conditions for life. That is liquid water, a reasonable temperature, the sort of things you get on Earth so we can basically have life as we know it, Jim. That's NE times FC. FC is the fraction of those planets with those conditions that actually do develop life. So life actually appears on there. Now this is very interesting because again, we didn't know what NE was until quite recently. Now we know that NE is about 17%, 17. So roughly 17% of stars have Earth-like planets that we detected. That is, those are in the Goldilocks zone, as it's called. Not too hot, not too cold. Fe times Fi. Fi is the amount of that kind of life which develops intelligence. with, it develops a brain or something similar to a brain, whatever it might think with, that allows it to become aware, and in the same way that humans are and many other animals are. Now FC is the proportion of that intelligent life that learns how to manage and control electromagnetic radiations, therefore making it, giving it the ability to speak, to communicate using radio waves. Now FC, until about just over 100 years ago, humans weren't considered FC because we hadn't learned to control electromagnetic radiation, and now we do, so we're in the FC category. And L is the length of time those civilizations exist before they either die out or their star turns into a supernova or a black hole, or they kill each other in warfare, or all kinds of things that limit the amount of time that that kind of creature can exist. When you calculate once you know all that, you calculate it all out, you have the number of civilizations of the galaxy. That's the Drake equation. However, I think there should be an extra factor to this equation that Drake and his team didn't include, and that is FM. I'll explain what FM is later. But what Sir Drake discovered was that he estimated there were 10,000 of these types of planets with these kinds of creatures on in the Milky Way galaxy. And he says if you were more broad-minded, he said some people wanted it as high as 80,000. And even the most curmudgeon conservative couldn't get it below 80. There's a lot of aliens out there, an awful lot of aliens. That was the conclusion of the Order of the Dolphin. Next slide, please, Mike. Now this is Stanley Miller. He and his colleague Harold Urey did a very interesting experiment. You often hear the phrase, the miracle of life. Life is actually not a miracle. Life is very, very well understood now, and in fact it is an emergent property of the universe. Basically, wherever it can appear, it does appear. And these guys, I think, were close to proving it. What they did was they did a chemistry experiment. Next slide, please, Mike. This is a model of their experiment, a little diagram here. They had a completely closed, airtight system here, which they filled with several substances. There was water, ammonia, methane, and a couple of other things, which they put together, and hydrogen. And they put these things together in this system here. They heated it up with our Bunsen burner there, and it began circulating in the form of steam and this mixture. Now, the chamber on the left there contains an electric spark. Like that is a form of artificial lightning, because it's often thought that lightning played a very important role in the formation of life on Earth. Now, what they wanted to see what happened, because this essentially is a model of the environment on Earth before life began. And they wanted to see what would happen if they kind of ran it again. Would the same thing happen? Would we get life again? It turns out the answer does seem to be yes. Now, they didn't run it, they started in 1952 and they ran it for a few years. They'd been good to run it longer, but they basically couldn't. But by the end of the experiment, they found all kinds of strange things. They found carbohydrates had formed, amino acids, which are known as the building blocks of life. These form proteins. And there were hints at more complex organisms, or more complex formations of chemicals and molecules that might resemble DNA. So the point is that life can be created almost effortlessly out of the simplest of processes. And once it's created, it never lets go. Once you have life, once life emerges, it evolves, it develops, it mutates, it never lets go, it always adapts to its surroundings. Whatever you throw at it, it continues to evolve and adapt. There's life on the bottom of the oceans. There's life in the volcanic vents where it's like very hot water, boiling water comes out of the earth. There's life there. There's life in coal mines, a mile underground. And once you're there, like I say, it never lets go. So that's it. That means that if we find life in places in the universe, we should expect to see it. It shouldn't be a surprise that we find it. What's more, Professor Chandravikrama Singh and Fred Hoyle, who's a famous physicist, they came up with the idea of panspermia. This literally means seeds everywhere. And I actually saw a lecture by Professor Chandra. It was very interesting. And he talks about the evidence for this. The evidence that, in fact, space itself is full of life. It's not this dead, cold, empty vacuum. It is full of life. It's like a rainforest up there. And wherever you go in space, the life actually lands on the planets and it sprouts there. It's almost like it's almost like seeds blowing in the wind. Next slide, please, Mike. This man is Carl Sagan. Does he look like Steve?
Yeah.
He does a bit, doesn't he?
No.
He does slightly. Now, Carl Sagan is a very, very important figure in this story. He's one of the greatest popularisers of this particular concept. And what's more, he kind of kept two sets of books. And I'll explain what I mean. In 1966, Carl Sagan wrote a book called Life in the Universe, which galvanised the public imagination. It popularised the idea of SETI. It's just a few years after the Order of the Dolphin. He was one of the members of the committee selected by Professor Frank Drake to work out the Drake equation. And this book really took the world by storm. He became a kind of pop scientist. I mean, there's lots of pop scientists nowadays. Some are better than others. You know, people like David Attenborough, Richard Dawkins, and Professor Brian Cox. And I won't go there. But this guy is. What's interesting about this guy is he made some statements about UFOs, which I think are suspicious. And I'll come on to that in a minute. Next slide, please, Mike. I don't know if we're there already. No, we're not there yet. No. So I was trying to remember the order of these things. This is a film called Contact. Now, Carl Sagan wrote several non-fiction books, Demon Haunted World, but he wrote one work of fiction, which is actually very good. Now, I've not read the book, but I've watched the film. He wrote the book in 1987 called Contact, and it was made into a film by Robert Zemeckis, produced by Carl Sagan's wife, or widow, because he died by then, Anne Dryden. And it stars Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. Now, Jodie Foster there is an astronomer called Ellie Arroway. Now, she is a SETI proponent, and she, it actually misrepresents SETI, because in the film, how many of you have seen this film? It's quite a well-known film. In the film, she's portrayed as a kind of maverick, a maverick who's obsessed with an idea or a field of research that is regarded by most scientists as silly and frivolous. As one scientist, one of her peers says to her, "Your career will be over before it's began if you persist with this nonsense." But the truth of the matter is, SETI is not fringe and crazy. It's ufology is like that for these people, but it's very, very well accepted. SETI. It's taken very seriously by the scientific community. It receives a lot of funding from state and private donors. So that was a misrepresentation of the SETI movement in the film. But apart from that, it's a very good film. She picks up a signal from another world. What happens after that is very, very interesting. The way, the effect it has on the world and things like that. So do watch this if you can. Next slide, please, Mike. Now, this is one of the tools used by SETI. As I said, it's very, very mainstream. And this is the Carl G. Jansky Very Large Array, New Mexico, USA. There are 27 of these huge antennas. They're 83 feet high, every single one. And you actually saw it on the slide before, because the slide before was the poster for the film, which was photographed there. And some of the film is set there, actually, because the character actually uses those telescopes in her quest to find aliens. And in fact, she's going to be shut down and kicked out before, just then she finds the signal, you know what I mean? So that is one of the tools they use. Now, this is extreme, but this could pick up a mobile phone signal on Jupiter. It's very sensitive. Next slide, please, Mike. Now, people often say, well, I said to you, success is guaranteed. SETI will succeed in detecting an alien signal. Well, I think it's quite likely that it already has. I think the signal has already been detected. It's been picked up. Well, the thing is, it's sitting around on some magnetic disk in some laboratory, on some database like this. This is one of the databases that SETI uses. It's a huge computer console bank, huge computer memory bank, processors and hard drives and things like that in there. Now, I believe it's already in there. They're just waiting for it to be processed, because there's a huge, massive amount of data that has to be worked through. Huge amount of data. Because you're talking about the entire celestial sphere, signals coming in on every wavelength, every frequency, every amplitude, picked up by this network of radio telescopes around the world, like the Carl G. Jansky Very Large Array and these others, and appearing and being put on these disks to be processed. It's a huge task. And it's like listening for a whisper in a hurricane, but it's actually worse than that. It's like listening for a whisper in a hurricane while you're standing in a rock concert venue. Because the Earth itself is a huge emitter of electromagnetic noise. Indeed, that's a problem that comes up again and again and again. I mentioned Project Ozma. Frank Drake picked up a signal from a passing aircraft and he thought it was coming from the star. So you have to have a computer system that can filter out the noise that Earth is making. That can filter all that out and so knows what's coming, what it's listening to is from farther afield. That's extraordinarily difficult. And indeed, I'm going to talk about an astronomer in a minute who fell foul of that very thing. So we're just waiting now for it all to be processed. Next slide, please, Mike. But you can help, you see. The SETI have come up with this amazing idea called SETI at Home. And what you do is, you basically volunteer to join the processing team by using your own computer. When your computer's on downtime, and it would normally be playing a screensaver or something like that, what you can do is you can run the SETI at Home application. They send you a block of encrypted radio data, which your computer then processes and sends it back to SETI. In doing so, they hope to clear the backlog. They hope to clear the backlog of all this stuff that they've actually gathered. Next slide, please, Mike. Now, I mentioned before there are a large number of planets that we already know exist, and there are a huge number. I'm just going to check the time. Take a break soon. But there are a huge number of these planets. These are just a handful of them. Now, these are exoplanets. They don't orbit the sun, they orbit other stars. And you see they're quite big. There's the Earth. Now, which one of these has the aliens on? It could be all of them or it could be none. But no one can say they're not there, and these all are potentially habitable, according to what we discovered. We know roughly their size, we know where they are, we know their temperatures because we know how close they are to their home star. And we also therefore know that they're likely to have conditions similar to Earth. And they have certain chemicals on them. We can actually see chemicals, the spectrographic analysis, just from the light that goes past them, the light they reflect, exactly what kind of chemicals they might have on them. Next slide, please, Mike. But we mentioned false alarms. We do get a few false alarms now and again, and we're going to go through some of them now. Some of them may be false alarms and some of them might not be. I'm going to start with one which definitely is. This is Susan Jocelyn Bell, who is an astronomer actually at the Open University, and in 1967 she was working at the Jodrell Bank Radio Telescope that's in Cheshire. It's one of the most powerful scientific astronomical instruments in the world. And it picked up a signal which she called LGM, Little Green Men. She seriously thought that it might be aliens from another star. And she said so quite openly. Next slide, please, Mike. This is what she actually picked up. It's called a pulsar, which is it's a rotating neutron star, a very dense star which is rotating and giving off like a lighthouse beam. And if the Earth is in the path of that beam, it picks up what looks like a pulsating signal. It's so regular that she thought it was coming, it had to be intelligently generated. And so that's what, so she made a mistake, but she took it seriously, people took it seriously enough. She knew that she could say that openly and without losing a job. Now, if she started talking about the UFO, she'd be kicked out the door, but you can talk about setting, that's absolutely fine. Astronomers take it seriously. Next slide, please, Mike. And 10 years later, on the 14th of August 1977, an astronomer called Larry Elner picked up what's become known as the WOW signal. Now, these numbers won't mean much to you unless you're familiar with radio astronomy. This is a computer printout from a radio observatory. And Elner was so impressed with what he discovered that he wrote rings around the interesting bits and put WOW there. What he'd done in the constellation of Sagittarius, what he picked up was what seemed to be an intelligently organised signal. That's never been repeated. No one knows exactly what it was, but it could be, and it's likely to be something intelligent. That's why he wrote WOW. And what's interesting about this is it's on the hydrogen channel. Now, the hydrogen channel is something that Frank Drake came up with at the meeting of the Order of the Dolphin. He said, well, what do we do? If we want to communicate with these aliens, we don't speak the same language, we don't know what they're going to say, we have no key to know in advance what they're going to say, or where to listen. So what frequency or what wavelength of electromagnetic radiation do we listen to? And he decided to use the frequency of hydrogen, which is the simplest and most abundant element in the universe, at its lowest energy level. And he said, if you're going to meet someone, you're going to go out to meet someone, you don't know, you haven't made arrangements beforehand, you have to guess where they're likely to be. This is what we're doing. So we chose the hydrogen channel as the most likely place that aliens would communicate. I think that's a mistake, because for the reasons I'll come to later, I think you can't anticipate that. It's hubris to actually assume that, but I'll come to that later. But this was on the hydrogen channel, which is one of the reasons it was so interesting. Next, Mike. Now this is the Lorimer burst. It was discovered by a team led by Duncan Lorimer, an astronomer at the University of West Virginia. You see a very, very organised straight line there. It's similar to the wow signal. It's like a burst of energy that suddenly appeared, and it lasted for a certain amount of time. But you find it very interesting. Again, it appeared to be something, it didn't fit with any natural process we know of in the universe. And so he took a great interest in this. Now, unfortunately, it turned out that it's probably caused by the microwave oven in the observatory kitchen. You see, this is a problem that happens. I mean, they're now working to try and eliminate that, but it's a bit embarrassing. But that sort of thing does happen. That's what I mean about it being a rock concert venue. But that's the Lorimer burst is just one example of these kind of things. And what's more, not all of them can be explained so easily. Next slide, please, Mike. Now this is the Kepler Space Observatory. It's very, very interesting, very powerful tool for astronomers to use. It is in space. It's actually flying in space. It's orbiting the sun a great distance from the Earth. It's good old-fashioned optical astronomy now, not radio astronomy. This is looking for light. And it's like a big telescope in space, and it can see much further than any telescope on Earth can. It doesn't have to stare through the atmosphere, or its pollution, or its interference. So the Kepler Space Observatory is a very good way of possibly finding aliens. And maybe it has. Because a few years it picked up a star. It came across a star about 12,000 light years away from us. It's called KIC 8462852. It's a catchy little name. But it's been nicknamed Tabby Star, after Dr. Tabitha Boyajian, who's the leader of the astronomical team that discovered it and wrote the paper about it. Now, Tabby Star is very unusual, because now stars do, the way you detect planets around a star is you wait for changes in the brightness of the star as some object comes between it and your gaze. It's similar to an eclipse. It's called an occlusion or a transit. It's like a little mini eclipse. Now, if you get a decrease in brightness of a certain amount for a certain irregular period, you know it's something orbiting that star in a regular period. Like the Earth orbits our Sun every 365 days. Now, what happened with Tabby stars, though, it's very, very different. You get like a very, very deep depression, a deep decrease in brightness, but it's irregular. And it's something that she expected to find on older stars, on newer stars, which had like dust and gas around that hadn't formed into planets. She couldn't work out what this was. She said it might be a cloud of comets or something like that. But she did a TED talk about it. I know you can see it on YouTube, it's a quarter-hour TED talk. And she says, very, very clearly, she says, one thing we must never do is think that it's aliens. We must leave that possibility to the last, because we must explore every other possibility of aliens. And I know what she's trying to do. It's pretty clear she's trying to distance herself from loonies like us. But maybe she can't. Next slide, please, Mike. This is an illustration of a Dyson Sphere, or a Dyson Swarm. Now this is something that came up with a guy called Freeman Dyson. He said that if we wanted to see signs of intelligent life out there in the universe, we should look for various stars, look at them, and just see, it's possible that some of them might have signs of constructions around them in space. He hypothesized that a very, very intelligent super race from another planet, another universe, another galaxy, or another star, would be able to build gigantic megastructures in space, which would be orbiting the star. It's like, have you ever read a book called Ringworld? And if you read that, it's a science fiction novel, which explores this very, very thing. Now, these would be used maybe for solar panels, or maybe as habitats for space stations, as habitats for the population, for the creatures to live in themselves, or for some other purpose. But he said it would be a sign of very, very high-level intelligence, what's known as a Type 4 civilization, or Type 5, I can't remember which one it is. Now, the thing is, the structure, the signature that Tabby Star has revealed is exactly what we would expect, what Freeman Dyson told us to expect if there was a Dyson Sphere around it. So has Tabitha Boyajian and her team actually discovered the first Dyson Sphere? Now, it's been scanned, the SETI Institute has actually scanned the star, and they can't pick up any signals, but they've only done a preliminary scan. The point of the matter is that it may turn out that this is exactly what we're seeing now. Next slide, please, Mike. You want to see Tabby Star, that's where it is. It's just there on the crux of Cygnus and Lyra, 12,000 light years away. You can see it through a small telescope or binoculars, if you know where to look. Next slide, please, Mike. This is the Mars meteor. Now, this is where we come back to Panspermia. This is a lump of rock that came from Mars and landed on Earth. But it showed signs of having fossilized single-cell life on it. This was a big fuss was made about this. It was all over the news. Because it could be that life came from Mars. Well, you know, I suspect the NASA and the other space agencies know there's life on Mars. They know there's probably quite sophisticated life on Mars. They're not saying anything. Next slide, please, Mike. Now, this here is Enceladus, which is a moon orbiting Saturn. Now, the funny thing is, the Cassini probe, before it crashed into Saturn, discovered something amazing. There's water underneath that. There's actually liquid water there, even though this is millions of miles away from the sun, where people only expect to see ice and rock. There's maybe through volcanic action or something else, something's keeping liquid water underneath this icy surface, like a frozen pond. A life could be under there, which means the Goldilocks zone could be a lot bigger than we thought at first. Next slide, please, Mike. Right, now there's one little problem. You may have spotted. What is the big mistake or problem that SETI is making? Apart from the UFO issue, which I'm going to come to.
Well, it's an assumption.
Well, they're just listening. They're doing nothing but listening. They've got all these telescopes pointing at the sky, and they're listening. Listening for signals from another planet. Wouldn't it be ironic, wouldn't it be an awful irony if the aliens are doing exactly the same thing? They're just sitting there, listening. So it's like we're on the phone and we're both sitting there, no one's saying a word, waiting for the other to speak first. So in November of 1974, the SETI Institute decided to say hello. And this is what they did. They sent this signal from the Arecibo Radio Observatory. This is in binary code, and this is designed to be picked up by aliens. It was actually transmitted towards a very small galaxy called M13. It's a mini galaxy that orbits the Milky Way. It's got about 100,000 stars in it. And this was transmitted directly towards M13. The problem is M13 is 25,000 light years away, which means that's how long it's going to take the signal to get there. If the aliens decide to reply straight away, it's going to take another 25,000 years to get back. So it's going to take 50,000 years to say hello. Well, yeah, I'll come to that in a minute. But this is the signal that was sent in binary code. Now, again, we have to assume the aliens will be able to understand this. They've made it as comprehensive as possible and made a lot of assumptions about the aliens' train of thought. What you have at the top here is the key to the binary code system, the white bit at the top. The purple and green bits and the blue bits in the middle and the white bit vertical. That's the DNA molecule in a diagram and in a data printout in binary code. Now, this is the interesting bit. You see there a distinct human figure, a simple human figure in red. And on to the left of that is a gauge of how big we are. And to the right is a block that explains how many of us there are. Below that, you see a simple diagram of the solar system. There's the sun, and there's the planets there. Then the third rock from the sun is raised above the others. That is the Earth. And that's telling whoever picks it up where we come from within our solar system. At the bottom, there's a model of the Arecibo Radio Observatory. So this was all done. They used this big, huge telescope. You may have seen it. It appears in the Contact movie. This huge bowl-shaped disc in Puerto Rico, US Trust Territory. And they sent this. It took about 3 minutes to transmit. And well, we're going to have to wait a long time, like I said. But it was quite a tense moment. Frank Drake, you know, there was a lot of people cheering and clapping when it was done. Next slide, please, Mike. That's it. That's M13. Lovely place. That it looks like a beautiful little spot there. But is there anyone there to hear us? Next slide, please, Mike. Now, SETI is very well funded. As if you watch the film Contact, like I said, it's a misrepresentation because the character Ellie Arroway, she is this dedicated solo loner who is committed to SETI when everyone else is laughing at her, and she has to struggle to get funding. This, in actual fact, SETI is very well funded through the state and through private individuals. And recently, the Breakthrough Listen program has begun, and it was organised and funded and paid for by the bald guy at the back there, Yuri Milner. Now, he's a Russian oligarch who was given billions and billions of dollars to this new SETI program called Breakthrough Listen. And basically, this is why I think it's very likely we're going to see some success at some point, because they don't have to worry about money anymore. And of course, it's been very, very well funded. It's been very well publicised as well by various people, including, as you can see, Professor Stephen Hawking there, who's recently passed away. Or maybe that's one of his doubles. I don't know if you saw the Rich Planet show about that. But whoever he is, he's supporting this. Richard Branson, other people are supporting this, and it's very, very well. It's a really mainstream thing. I don't think there's going to be problems with keeping it going. We'll see where it goes. Next slide, please, Mike. Now this is the, what's the time now? Okay. I'll describe this briefly because there's a couple of things. We'll take a little break and I'll carry on with it. But basically, there's several deep space probes that we've sent out into the universe, and some of them have already left the solar system, particularly the Pioneer and Voyager probes. And this was attached to the Voyager probes, which are the most distant ones. And you actually have here, there's actually a record. It's like a record, like a golden disc. It's a record made of gold, just like the old records you used to have. And anyone younger than me won't know what I'm talking about. You remember records? Anyone younger than me, can you imagine iTunes on a black plastic dinner plate? That's a record. Got it, kids? That's what it's actually the best, the most secure way of doing it. So they recorded all the sounds from planet Earth, including people saying hello in 50 different languages, messages from the Director General of the United Nations and from the US President and from the Soviet Premier and people like that, British Prime Minister, just saying hello to the aliens, and lots of sounds from planet Earth as well. There's also this disc here, the cover, which is put on. That's instructions in binary code, including the key to binary code, just like with the Arecibo message, which is intended to instruct the aliens how to build a record player, to play it on a gramophone. Again, hopefully if they understand it. And Carl Sagan designed this, and Carl Sagan actually designed the Arecibo message as well. And his name's going to come up again. But till now, for now though, I think we need to have a little break. So we will come back to this subject very soon. In the meantime, there's some books for sale there. Those are the books, the Roswell trilogy that I've written, which are all about UFOs and crash retrievals and Area 51, things like that, in fictional form. Do let me know if you want a copy. You may have got the other copies. There's a new one that's come out since I've last been here. Okay, so thank you very much everyone. See you in a few minutes.
Yeah, just start down. Hold the button down there. Just press it lightly, it'll focus first. Yeah, just snap away.
That photo of me in bed from last year before I spoke got away. Yeah. I don't think so. That's right.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the need to communicate with aliens, and there is a fundamental difficulty when it comes to dealing with aliens, and I think the difficulty is even bigger than a lot of the SETI scientists realise, because we're talking about communicating with beings without using language. This means you can't speak to them in any language we know of. You have to speak to them symbolically. Now, we do that on Earth up to a point. For example, if you go to airports, you'll find that there are certain symbols in signs, pictographs rather than words, because you have a lot of people in an airport speaking lots of different languages from all over the world. So, for example, a picture of a plate with a knife and fork beside it means a cafeteria, somewhere you can buy food. A picture of a wine glass means a bar. Things like that. You see that at airports. But you're dealing with your fellow humans. How do you communicate with beings that are not human? That's the difficult thing. And as you see here, this attempt by Carl Sagan, you see on the cover of the golden disc on the Voyager probes, is how he solved that problem, or tried to solve it. Next slide, please, Mike. Now here's another image, also designed by Carl Sagan. This was for the Pioneer probes. We have here, this is what's known as the Pioneer plaque. So what you have here, it's similar to the Arecibo message in many ways. You have a key at the top, very top on the left, that is the hydrogen channel in pictorial form in terms of a diagram of molecules. There's two molecules with a single atom, single proton, a single electron, which is what hydrogen is. Now, as you see at the bottom here, there is the diagram of the solar system again, like the Arecibo message. And you can see here there's a line coming from the third planet with a picture there, a small picture, a graphic of the actual spacecraft itself. Indicate an arrow, I hope they know what that means. And it's indicating that the craft came from that particular planet. Now this star-like structure on the left is actually a map. It's actually a map showing more or less where the Earth is. And what it is, these lines here have the hydrogen encoded numbers on them, indicating distance. And it's actually the distance of the Earth to the nearest pulsars. The pulsars discovered by Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who she thought were she thought were little green men. Susan Jocelyn Bell. And you have here, this is interesting here, you have here a large picture of the spacecraft and two human figures. Now, you notice one of the human figures is doing that with his hand. Now that is actually a universal sign of friendship and goodwill among humans. And this is literally everywhere in the world, wherever you go. It's the same in all cultures. You could go into the middle of the Amazon jungle and you could meet tribes that have never had any contact with the outside world. And you could hold your hand up like that and they would understand what that meant. But we're going slightly further afield here than the Amazon jungle. I mean, who knows how the aliens would interpret that gesture? I mean, wouldn't it be awful if this somehow was interpreted as kind of like, you know, as something really, it could be interpreted as some kind of aggressive symbol. And then when the spaceships land like Independence Day and they start blowing up our cities, we say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And they say, well, look what you sent us. That is a slight exaggeration, but it illustrates the problem, doesn't it? That this sort of thing is actually quite risky. You don't know necessarily what you're going to say. So next slide, please, Mike. Now this is an interesting thing. This is called a Oumuamua. Now this is, Oumuamua is an actual interstellar object. It's the first interstellar object that ever entered the solar system, which has been universally accepted as such. It passed through the solar system a couple of years ago. It's now heading out into space again. It's passed the orbit of Saturn recently. Now, this was scanned. There was no nothing radio-like coming from it, but it has changed course, and it shouldn't be doing that. It's not obeying the laws of orbital mechanics, Kepler's laws. It's moved onto a different course, and the astronomers are currently scratching their heads wondering how it's doing that. There's a guy called Abraham Loeb who's very bravely spoken out, and he says he thinks this is a spaceship. Now this image here is known as the turd picture for obvious reasons. The Oumuamua is it's about 3,000 feet long and about 300 feet across. So it's very long and thin. It's a cigar-shaped object. Now, this is an artist impression. No one knows what a Oumuamua looks like. No one's been close enough to know what it looks like. They know what shape it is by analysing its orbit, its rotation, and how it reflects the light. It's only a speck of light in the best telescopes. So this is a completely, this is an assumption, this sort of rocky, natural look is a complete assumption on the part of the artist. It could very easily be completely straight and oblong shaped like the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey. But it's heading out of the solar system. It's changing course though. I'm hoping it'll turn all the way around and come back. Then it'll be undeniable, won't it? Next slide please, Mike. Right, now we're going to play another little video here. Now this is interesting. This is a clip from a TV show called UFO Conspiracy Road Trip, produced by Renegade Productions for the BBC. And it's basically a group of UFO believers who've taken to meet a SETI scientist. Now this is an illustration of exactly what the SETI experts think of us. This is Dr. Seth Shostak of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Can you play the video, please, Mike?
I might have to have something to do with sound.
You might have to what?
You'll have to bring the...
Right, oh I see, okay, no worries.
Hang on. I've actually got the sound turned down. Got the volume. Is the volume anywhere? Oh. Yeah, I know, it's on the laptop. I turned it down the other day. There's like a volume button up and down. So,
There's no slider on the actual screen.
hang on.
A scientific organisation whose mission
Can you hear
is
it?
to search the cosmos
Yeah.
for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence.
What we try and do is try and eavesdrop on signals they might be sending our way.
Okay.
Just trying to hear ET's radio broadcasts. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of planets out there that have plenty of life that's not very clever. Life that doesn't write great literature and doesn't build radio transmitters, but we're not going to hear from those guys. Our galaxy has 200 billion stars. It probably has 1 trillion planets. That's with a T.
Right.
That's a large number. Now, if this is the only planet where anything interesting is happening, that makes us a miracle.
Right.
And one thing you learn from studying astronomy is that every time you believe in miracles, you're wrong.
Like many scientists, Dr. Shostak thinks that alien life exists, but we just haven't seen it yet. So what does he think of Bridget's UFO encounter?
I had a close encounter in central Los Angeles, Brentwood, and it involved a 45-foot craft.
But no pictures.
I was in shock. I think you would be also. You know, if I had a camera, I would still have someone ridicule me.
Can I ask, what about the craft made you think it was extraterrestrial?
It was nothing that I had seen before. It had no wings, it had no
Well,
fuel.
you said that you would have seen something like that in the movie.
Yeah, I've seen spaceships on TV. It's all children's TV channels now. Spaceships everywhere.
I think that if there were compelling evidence, yes, you would have tens of thousands of academics beavering away working on it. If the evidence is poor, they're not going to waste the time. That's the thing. And the fact that they're not doing that means that the evidence is poor. There's not a very good case for alien visitation.
Dr. Shostak's views make complete sense to me. I wanted to ask the doctor, why do ordinary people like Bridget and Darren believe they've seen such extraordinary things?
There's something about a conspiracy that I think is very empowering. If you, for example, think that we're being buzzed by alien spacecraft, and those pointy-headed, nerdy scientists down at the local university don't agree with you, you know something they don't know.
Yes.
And so there's something empowering
It's
about that.
cachet.
Yeah, I think that's understandable.
Thanks. My God, wasn't that awful? That was there's a limit on how bad a TV program can be by accident. That's a serious conspiracy road trip UFOs by the BBC. Now, you may have noticed during the discussion between Bridget, the UFO witness, who I know her actually, and I know that she's been completely misrepresented in that programme. I warned her not to go on the show, actually. And Dr. Seth Shostak. Do you notice how the camera keeps cutting between different shots? That's editing. That is not the discussion that they actually had. That is a very carefully edited interaction. She's not necessarily replying to the things that he says, and vice versa. The whole point is to try and misrepresent the entire UFO issue. Renegade Pictures actually approached me and asked me if I wanted to take part in this series. It's actually a 3-part series. I can't remember which one they wanted me to be in. They said, Ben, do you want to come and be on this really wonderful new series? We're exploring these strange new things and we want honest people to come on. I declined. So, next slide please, Mike. I think maybe is it another video? What's this? Is this another yeah, this is another video. I'm going to play you a video. This is very interesting. This is several clips of Carl Sagan on TV. So have a watch of this.
Since 1947, there have been hundreds of thousands of reports of UFOs, unidentified flying objects. This subject has more, I think, to do with religion and superstition than with science. That was the story told by Betty and Barney Hill. Virtually all scientists who've studied it are skeptical, but UFO enthusiasts think the Hill case is a classic example of a close encounter of the third kind. Why? The Hills' own psychiatrist described their story as a kind of dream.
That's not true.
Without corroborating evidence, the star map argument is worthless. And yet, this is one of the best attested cases of UFO close encounters. For all I know, we may be visited by a different extraterrestrial civilization every second Tuesday. But there's no support for this appealing idea. The extraordinary claims are not supported by extraordinary evidence. There are curious daylight photos of UFOs. Some look suspiciously like hats or hubcaps thrown into the air. Photos can be faked. More common are unidentified lights at night. They're often aircraft, but if we can't identify a light, that doesn't make it a spaceship. Most reports of unidentified flying objects turn out to be something else, like a refracted image of a bright planet or the re-entry of an artificial satellite. Some are psychological aberrations, some are hoaxes. Never is there any compelling physical evidence, a detailed close-up photograph of a strange spacecraft or a small device of extraterrestrial manufacture, or a book written in alien hieroglyphics. Never. There are reports of such things, but never the things themselves. Since Cosmos was first released, interest in UFOs has persisted. It seems to me that there are fewer sightings of strange objects in the skies these days, and more stories about personal encounters with alleged extraterrestrials, like the account of Betty and Barney Hill that we dramatized. There are still people who claim to have been abducted by aliens, or even sexually abused, or even impregnated by them. Best-selling, purportedly serious books have been written about such claims. But the critical fact remains that all we have still is just anecdote. There are no close-up photographs, no artifacts, nothing that would convince a skeptic. All there are is stories. And stories just aren't good enough on a matter of this importance. I'm still waiting for hard evidence. There's not a single verified or checked out report which is at all connectable with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. If you would believe, as the flying saucer cultists would have us believe, that the majority of the saucer reports are due to their visitations, they have a very strange situation. That means several spaceships are coming to the Earth over interstellar distances every day, as if all the anthropologists in the world were to converge on one of the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean, because because they just invented the fishnet there or something.
That's three separate clips from Carl Sagan taken at different times in his life. The first one was from the TV series Cosmos, which apart from that is actually quite a good series. Then there was the Cosmos Update, which he made 10 years after that. He made that in the early 90s, 10 years after the original Cosmos series. And then the final clip where he's sitting next to the James Bond bad guy there was in his youth, when he, sometime in the 60s that would have been, or the 70s maybe. He never changed his position on the subject the whole time. It's not possible for someone of his obvious intelligence not to understand that what he's saying is false. What's more, as Bryce Zabel has discovered, Bryce Zabel actually wrote the TV series Dark Skies. There's a distinct reason to think that Carl Sagan was approached by the government and told to take this line about UFOs. He was persuaded somehow. In the TV series Dark Skies, there's a fictionalisation. Similar to my own books, Bryce Zabel fictionalised a real-life possible scenario, and it appears that Sagan was told the truth about UFOs and told that the necessity for covering it up for the stability of society, which I'll come on to in a minute. But Sagan he must know that what he's saying is false. Apparently he was originally, before he became famous, quite keen on UFOs. When he became famous and was on TV all the time, that's when his line changed. And it changed very suddenly, and it changed very radically. Next slide, please, Mike. And here he is, Mr. SETI himself. This is the man who says, he's the loudest voice of all in all history, who said, the universe is teeming with life. It's everywhere. Everywhere except here, where the only life is human. There's some kind of wall built, it's almost like there's a wall built around the Earth through which only humans can live on Earth. And everything else around us, with all the other life forms that he's desperately trying to communicate with radio transmissions, is somehow separated from us. Even as I say, they themselves may be more scientifically advanced. And we ourselves are developing spacecraft, which means we could go and visit them. The contradiction, the double think, as George Orwell would call it, within this man's mind, can't be accidental. He has to know something of the truth, and he has to be lying, in my opinion. Next slide, please, Mike. Now we come on to another issue. This is what's known as Fermi's paradox, or the Great Silence. And this is the conundrum, well, it's not really a conundrum, but it's called a conundrum, which is the universe really is teeming with life, and some of the Earth planets are a lot older than us. The question is, why aren't they here? This is Enrico Fermi, who's a famous physicist, and also he came up with this idea, which is what's called the Fermi's paradox. Next slide, please, Mike. We have an illustration here. You see, we have the Earth. We have an older planet, which is like 3.46 billion years older. So there's more advanced life on that planet, and they come forward to the present day. And the question is, well, why haven't they reached us? In a sense, this is the question I was asking earlier. Well, you know, where's the law which says they can't be here? Why can't they reach us? And why are they not here? Why have they never reached us? Why is, when we stick antennas out into the cosmos, we hear nothing but natural radiation, nothing there at all? So the question is, that is the question. Where are they? Why have they not come here? Next slide, please, Mike. Well, the answer to Fermi's paradox, the Great Silence, is very simple indeed. They have. These photographs, these two photographs, the one on the bottom and the one on the right, I'm absolutely certain are genuine. They show craft which I think are not of this Earth. They're nothing man-made. There's all kinds of reasons to think these are not produced by humans. They're very advanced. Where do they come from? The truth of the matter is, all this life that's out in the universe is coming here. It is here, and it's just because they're not behaving like we expect them to, transmitting on the hydrogen line, coming down on the White House lawn saying, "Take me to your leader," in perfectly accented Hollywood English, does not mean they're not real. Next slide, please, Mike. Now we come on to crop circles. Now these are very interesting. This is an idea This is, again, this is the big question. People say, well, what are the aliens doing? If they fly down here from their distant planets, they do nothing except they just make a few marks in a cornfield, they abduct a couple of wide-eyed Yorkshire yokels and poke prods into them and things like that, and then they let them go and they go home without even saying hello. Why are they doing that? Why would they do that? And the thing is, the answer to that question is not why would they do that. This is what people really mean is that if I went to another planet, I would not do that. But that's anthropomorphizing. We're essentially putting ourselves in the alien's position. This is where all the thing about hydrogen channel comes from. And this is where we come on to the last factor of the Drake equation, FM, which is missing. FM stands for mindset. It's not just creatures that have evolved, control electromagnetic radiation, can communicate. What proportion of those that can communicate have the mindset to do so? In other words, they think like us. We shouldn't put ourselves in the alien's shoes. I don't think we can do that, even if they have 2 feet. And this is an example of what I'm talking about. This is an amazing image here. It's like one of the old dot matrix images of newspapers. You actually have to look at it from a distance and maybe blur your eyes for a little bit just to see how lifelike that is. It looks like a human face. It appeared in a field in Hampshire in 2001. And now, when I did this presentation in Homeford, and someone came up to me and he said, "Ben, I know who makes these circles. It's all right, Ben, these were made by people, I know them." And I said, "Well, how do you know?" "Oh, they told me." And I said, "Right, well, couldn't they prove that they've confessed they did it?" "Oh, they can't ever admit it, because then they'd be arrested by the police." And I said, "Well, how do you know they did it?" And see, I've actually had I know people who make these things with planks. I know a couple of people. When this big 3D box image crop circle appeared once, 2 different crop circle teams confessed to making it. So either one of them's lying or both of them are lying. Crop circle makers can tell lies too, and the 100% man-made hypothesis is a claim and it can be falsified. This image is it's an incredible piece of work. Whoever did it, it's an amazing thing. Now, next slide please, Mike. Now, just a few days after that image appeared, this one did, in the same field. Now, and does that look familiar? Yep. Yes, it does. You've seen this before, haven't you? Next slide please, Mike. And see, there they are, so close together. The face and the Arecibo message, just next to each other in the same field, just a couple of days apart. Next slide, please, Mike. And here we have it, the Arecibo message, just like it was sent from the Arecibo Observatory in November 1974, has appeared in that field. Or, has it? Take a closer look. It's not, is it? It's different. Do you remember the first one? Yeah. Do you remember the one that was sent from Arecibo? It's a bit different. I'll show you. Firstly, the top bit is exactly the same, the binary code cipher, the primer, the key. Now, you come down to the DNA molecule, and it's very different. It's not quite exactly the same. It's not DNA as we know it. It's something similar, but it's slightly differently structured. Someone would have to know an awful lot about biochemistry to produce this, to actually invent something like this. And look at the figure, that red figure. That's not human, is it? Look at it. Big head, large eyes, small stature. It's a grey. On the left, you can see there's a different number, and they're smaller, and there's a different number of them. But look at the solar system diagram here. We have the sun there, or the star, and 3 of the planets are raised up. And what's more, there's this group of 4, which you might refer to a group of moons around a gas giant or something. But these creatures live on 3 different planets of their solar system. So they're different from us, who only live on 1. And the thing at the bottom is indecipherable, the purple thing at the bottom, I don't know what that is. But funny enough, a crop circle appeared very close to the location of this particular crop circle, and it looked a more complicated version of that. Next slide please, Mike. This appeared the following year in 2002, in the same field in Hampshire. This is one of the most remarkable crop circles I've ever seen. Firstly, you have another amazing dot matrix image of a grey alien. It actually looks like a more detailed picture of the simple block figure on the Arecibo reply. It's as if after the Arecibo message was sent, someone out there said, "Oh, let's not make them wait 50,000 years. Let's reply to them now in our own way." It's as if they knew we'd sent that message because they're closer to the Earth than the M13 galaxy. And I thought, let's reply now, but we're going to reply in our own way. We're going to reply the way we do, not the way these humans do. That circular structure is very interesting because there's actually a message in there in code. It's in ASCII 2 code actually, which is a known computer code. Now it's amazing. It's all perfect. Not one mistake was made in this. Next slide, please, Mike. All these images I just showed you appeared in one farmer's field. The field is next to this, the Chilbolton Radio Observatory. This particular radio observatory has been a key node in the SETI network and has been used to listen for creatures from other planets. And maybe, as I said, the aliens may well want to communicate with us when we make transmissions out into the universe, but they may not want to communicate the way we expect them to or want them to. They may want to communicate in their way. Next slide, please, Mike. This is Terence McKenna. How many of you heard of this guy? He's well known. He's a brilliant man, actually. He's a great writer, a great orator. I mean, there's speeches he does online. There's hundreds of hours of speeches. He can talk for like 10 times as long as I am this evening. And he's very, very interesting indeed. Now, he was a big critic of SETI. He said that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence was rather like pointing a telescope at the sky and expecting to see a good Italian restaurant. That is that's overstating it somewhat, but I know the point he's making. He's making the same point that I was about FM. We're dealing with a far more difficult communication problem than we originally thought. It's not as simple. And even some people like Sagan and that, they understood that there was a challenge of communication without language. But it's much worse than that. It's a communication with a psychology that is so different from ours. We may not even be able to understand it. We have trouble communicating with other species on our planet. I mean, if you have a dog, for example, or another pet, there is a limited amount of communication between the two of you. If a dog gets hungry, he'll let you know. If someone comes to the house he doesn't like, he'll let you know. If he wants to go for a walk, he'll let you know. But every so often the dog will do something. Everyone's got a dog, I'm sure you've had this experience. He'll do something and you look at him and think, why is he doing that? He knows he's a dog. We don't, we're human. And for when it comes, there's someone called Denise Herzing who's trying to communicate with dolphins, and she sort of understood this quite a lot. When you go off-world and you go to a complete alien creature that has evolved from the very basic primeval soup into a multi-celled intelligent organism, the question is, we may be in a position where communication will be extremely difficult. Next slide, please, Mike. How many of you have seen this film, Arrival? Oh, good. Actually, people, you see it if you haven't. If you love UFOs, you'll love this. This is an alien invasion movie, but it's a very good one. Alien invasion movies vary a lot in technical quality and intellectual content. This one scores very high on both axes. It's probably the best alien invasion movie I've ever seen. It is about where these spaceships come down to Earth from another world, and there's lots of panic and no one knows what to do. And they send a linguist in to try and communicate with them. And just deciphering their language is just so difficult. Just working out what they mean. It's just really, really tricky. And the people who made this film understand the point I'm making here. And indeed, we've seen this. People who have had encounters with UFOs and aliens, people who are contactees and abductees, they've reported this. They've reported that they have telepathic communication with these creatures, but even so, there is misunderstanding. A lot is lost in translation. Next slide, please, Mike. So, anyone spot the hidden message? Yeah. It's pointing the wrong way. What it is. This is actually a photograph of the Carl G. Jansky Very Large Array, which I showed you earlier, taken at sunset. And these telescopes are pointing dutifully up into the heavens, waiting for a call, waiting for some kind of communication from someone out there. But the someone is already here, look. There's a flying saucer right behind them. It's on our planet, it's just hovering above the observatory. And they're ignoring it. The antennae are all pointing the other way. And that is a portrait of this conundrum that I'm talking about this evening. This division between ufology and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Next slide, please, Mike. Right, this is the bit you've all been waiting for. Conspiracy, alien cover-up exposed. Is there some kind of conspiracy here? Is there some kind of government intervention to cover this up? And indeed, maybe we have had signals from space and the government aren't telling us about it. Maybe they keep it a secret. Maybe SETI is being suppressed in the same way that things like Roswell are being suppressed. And we can anticipate this on theoretical grounds. Next slide, please, Mike. Now, this is basically the point that Steve Bassett is making. He makes it in a different kind of way. What he says here in this article, well, it's actually, sorry, this is the actual article he's criticising. See, this is from Life Science. No signs of aliens in the closest 1,300 stars. Hunt funded by Russian billionaire reveals. That's the Breakthrough Listen project by Yuri Milner. Now, firstly, 1,300 stars is not very much. It's very close to the Earth. It's within 100 light years or so. There's plenty many more to see. But Steve Bassett has written an article. Do you know Steve Bassett of the Paradigm Research Group? He's good. He'd be a good speaker here. He's a good guy. He has said basically that the whole SETI project was designed to divert people's attention away from UFOs, specifically by the government, what he calls the truth embargo. It had a lot of funding and a lot of attention, a lot of media coverage. Carl Sagan promoting it, knowing full well there are UFOs. And Stan Friedman, the great Stanton T. Friedman, who's just passed away, he said SETI stood for silly effort to investigate. Next slide, please, Mike. This is a symbol of the Brookings Institute. This is what I mean why we can anticipate a cover-up on theoretical grounds. Because this organisation in 1959, just after NASA had been created, released a document advising NASA on how to handle the discovery of intelligent extraterrestrial life. This document referred to not only extant life, that is, living creatures found in space, but the remains of past civilizations. And what Brookings did, it didn't specifically mention a cover-up, it didn't specifically say there should be a cover-up, but it really did hint that that would be necessary in as many words, reading between the lines. It says effectively, the revelation of extraterrestrial life, the revelation that we're not alone, that we're not this little oasis of life in an infinite cosmic desert, that would have a massive impact on the government, the church, science, society in general. It may be an idea not to shout it from the rooftops. So there is every reason to suppose that the government would be interested in a cover-up of just the presence of extraterrestrial life. Next slide, please, Mike. And that is a good example of what we're talking about, the face on Mars. I believe it is an artifact of an extraterrestrial civilization. And a lot's been said about that. You could have an entire presentation on that subject alone. But the response, the way NASA has dealt with this, indicates that they are taking the advice of the Brookings Institute. Have you seen the saga about there's no probe that's been sent there. It's been imaged from a long distance, but the actual image was deliberately distorted to make it look less interesting. It seems as if NASA are taking that advice. Next slide, please, Mike. There is actually a protocol for the discovery of extraterrestrial life, which does look as if the potential for subversion is there. What happens is the SETI Institute has negotiated a code of conduct with various governments, protocols for an ET signal detection. Now this is, there's actually a division of the SETI Institute which has an amazing name, the Central Bureau of Astronomical Telegrams. That's great, isn't it? And so the Central Bureau of Astronomical Telegrams is basically is what manages this. If someone in the SETI movement detects a signal, the first thing they do is they keep it to themselves. They don't spread it around. They then discuss it with their peers from around the world, all other people within the SETI movement. They verify that it is real, and then they carry out a very carefully controlled, after they inform the President of the United States or the various other heads of government, wherever it happens to be, then they carry out a very carefully and controlled publication within the scientific community and the media. And then no one should make a reply to any signal until it's been negotiated. There should be no reply to any signal until it's been talked about. Then they have an organised response. So you could say, well, there, you know, the bit where they inform the government, that is an area where subversion could occur, theoretically, couldn't it? Next slide, please, Mike. I think not. Now, of course, you may say, well, come on, they've covered up alien life, they've covered up Roswell, haven't they? They've covered up the Nottinghamshire Roswell, they've covered up other things. Gary Jones was here talking about the Pentook incident. They've covered that up, they tried to. They try to cover up these things wherever they happen. But there's a very different flow of information between signals from outer space and a flying saucer crashing on the Earth. If a flying saucer crashes on the Earth, the government move in, they seal it off, they get rid of the debris, and they put out a weather balloon story. If a signal comes from outer space, they can't exactly put a do not cross tape around it, can they? This is just a picture of just a few of the radio telescopes that exist around the world, and the optical telescopes. That one's an optical one, I think. This is just a handful of various telescopes. There are thousands of these telescopes. They're in all countries of the world. They even have one at the South Pole. The number of astronomers who work in them and the various other people, there's a huge number of professional astronomers, a massive network. Now, I believe it's not possible to suppress some kind of interesting thing coming from space that's detected by a telescope. Astronomy is the one truly democratic science. All the data is above our heads. And I really don't think it would be possible to cover it up if there was a signal from another planet. Next slide, please, Mike. It's not only the professional astronomers, it's the amateurs. Astronomy is still one of the most popular hobbies. You can pick up for a few £100, you can pick up a decent telescope from the shop. And people do that. There's a big amateur astronomical community. And indeed, they can now get online and have access to much bigger telescopes now. So, indeed, I think Oumuamua was discovered that way. The millions and millions of amateur astronomers would also be looking at this. It's a top-heavy conspiracy beyond belief, so I don't think there would be a cover-up of a signal from another world. Next slide, please, Mike. So will we see this? Will we see our fearless leader, Boris Badenoff, standing outside number 10, telling us that we've picked up an intelligent signal from another world? I hope this is one occasion he does brush his hair for, I really do. Next slide, please, Mike. Well, what about the God Emperor himself? Will he do the same? Knowing him, it would be on Twitter first, won't it? I'm here to tell you today that we have detected a signal from the star Zeta Reticuli, and there is a Dyson Sphere around Tabby Star. They may be forced to do this. The thing about it is, though, I mean, next slide, please, Mike. Yeah. This is something I hope to see. I hope to see this gimp forced to eat a lump of humble pie he won't be able to get down his throat. I think he'll just retire just to avoid that. I really do. This guy is so egotistical.
He's a very nice guy, actually.
Is he? Oh, well. From what I've seen of him, I've never met him, but I can't agree from what I've seen of him.
That's his brother.
Is it? Oh, right. I'm not going to take it back, sorry. Next slide, please, Mike. So, you may think, well, is it a distraction? Is it just it's a distraction from what we are doing? Maybe this is what Steve Bassett has said. SETI is the silly effort to investigate. It's the attempt to divert attention away from what really matters, which is that the UFOs the aliens are already here. That's the point. They're on this Earth already. They've reached us. And SETI is distracting that away from us. And I think, I can't disagree with that. When you look at this behaviour of Carl Sagan, his promotion of SETI at the same time as his continuous mindless discrediting and dismissal of the UFO phenomenon, how the two doing it at the same time must mean that it is intended for that effect. However, as there are too many people involved in SETI, which means for it all just to be a cover-up. If we do receive a signal, and indeed when we receive a signal, it might actually have a positive knock-on effect on ufology. Because it will, even though the SETI proponents were saying, finally, we found the signal, this is the only contact we get with aliens ever, it may make the general public look in our direction too, and start asking the very relevant questions that I've asked this evening in this talk. It may get people in the right mindset for a raising of the profile of ufology. I believe the success of SETI is not necessarily a bad thing. So I look forward to it immensely. Next slide, please, Mike. And if you're really interested, if you love UFOs and you love Area 51 and crash retrievals in Roswell, you do no better than to buy a copy of the books I've got here this evening. The Roswell trilogy, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure. Next slide, Mike. Roswell Revealed, a world after disclosure. And again, oh, sorry, right. Next one, please. Sorry, I don't know what that's doing there. Is that it? That's it. All right, and there's the last one, which is Roswell Redeemed, Humanity After Disclosure. These books are fictional, they're just novels, but it's a fictional scenario where I asked the question, what if? What if we were given truth instead of lies? What would happen? I had to think very carefully about that, and I came up with an imaginary scenario, and I think you'll probably, if you enjoy these sort of things, you hear about it in this group, you'll enjoy those books. They're £10 each, or £15 for two, or £25 for all three. So I hope you'll leave tonight with one, which you get signed by me. If you don't, you can get them on Amazon as well, if not. But thank you very much, all of you. It's been good to talk to you this evening. I hope you got something out of it.